Kaelis Drayen was once seen as a devoted father, Elira Cael as a brilliant scientist, and their daughter Vexa as the heart of a picture-perfect family, until one stormy night shattered that illusion forever. When Elira vanished without a trace, and Kaelis disappeared with their child, what began as a missing persons case soon spiraled into a horrifying international manhunt that would uncover a secret so disturbing it stunned the entire world. In a small coastal town called Lunora Bay, nestled between cliffs and calm seas, lived a family that many admired from a distance. Kaelis Drayen was known across the world as a marine biologist who had devoted his life to ocean conservation. His elegant wife, Elira Cael, ran a local non-profit that helped orphans and displaced children. They had adopted a quiet, dark-eyed girl named Vexa 5 years earlier from an overseas orphanage. Together, they lived in a charming white cottage with blue shutters that faced the endless sea. Tourists would often walk past just to admire the garden, where wind chimes danced, and sea breeze carried the scent of lavender. To those who scrolled through their lives online, the Drayens looked like a dream. Their photos showed sunsets at the beach, candlelit dinners, and holiday trips to exotic islands. Elira often posted about her love for Kaelis, describing him as a rare soul and a protector of all things fragile. In return, Kaelis would share photos of her laughing by the water or holding Vexa's hand on a cliffside hike. Their online followers called them the family with the ocean heart. But in Lunora Bay, perfection was always suspect. Neighbors began to notice small, uneasy changes. Elira, once full of life and always present at community events, started missing meetings. She stopped volunteering at the shelter she helped build. Her car was seen parked outside the house for days at a time. When asked, Kaelis would smile and explain she was just tired or on a personal retreat. People wanted to believe him. After all, Kaelis had always been charming, the kind of man who made everyone feel like they mattered. But the house, once full of warmth and color, seemed cold. Its curtains were always drawn now. The garden grew wild. Vexa, once playful and curious, walked to school with her head down and her sleeves too long. One evening, the town experienced a heavy storm. The winds howled and waves slammed against the cliffs. During the chaos, an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Elor thought she heard something strange. A scream, or perhaps a cry, from the Drayen home. She dismissed it, blaming the storm and her failing hearing. But after that night, no one saw Elira. Again, Kaelis claimed she had gone away to rest, that she needed to disconnect from everything. He said she'd left him a note and packed a small bag. He shared a handwritten letter with Elira's charity board that said she was overwhelmed and needed solitude. It seemed legitimate. Elira had always spoken about the pressure of constantly being on display. Still, some were unsettled. Her phone was disconnected. She didn't reply to emails. She missed Vexa's school performance, something she had never done before. Even more concerning were the rumors that Vexa had started talking to herself in class, sketching disturbing images during art lessons. When her teacher gently asked her about them, she shut down completely. One day she arrived at school with bruises on her arms. When questioned, she whispered only one word: fall. The teacher reported it. As required by law, Child Services visited the Drayen home. Kaelis greeted them warmly, offering coffee and speaking in soft tones. He explained Vexa's bruises as a result of roughhousing at the beach. He walked them through a clean, well-kept home, even pointing out a fresh journal entry he said Elira had written before leaving. It seemed plausible. The visitors left without raising any alarms, but something about the house felt wrong. The silence, the heavy scent of bleach in the garage, the way Vexa's eyes never met theirs, and the pendant, Elira's favorite necklace, hanging on the bathroom mirror, exactly where she always placed it before bed. She never went anywhere without it. In a town like Lunora Bay, people watched each other without seeming to. And in the days following that visit, whispers began to grow louder. Some believed Elira had truly left. Others feared something much darker had occurred. The perfect life so many had envied was starting to unravel, thread by thread. The disappearance of Elira Cael sent quiet waves of unease through Lunora Bay, but it wasn't until the third day that those waves turned into a storm. Her absence was no longer something people whispered about. It became a question that demanded answers. She had been scheduled to speak at a global marine conservation conference in Oslo, a high-profile event she had prepared months for. When she didn't arrive, organizers tried to reach her. No response. Emails bounced back. Her assistant, who had spoken to her only 2 days before she vanished, called it deeply unlike her. Kaelis responded with ease when asked. He told the press that Elira had gone on a silent retreat, away from technology and noise, to find herself. He even claimed she had left her phone behind intentionally. The note she supposedly left him reappeared, creased, smudged, but still legible. In it, Elira wrote about feeling lost, needing solitude, and not wanting anyone to search for her. The tone was distant, formal, oddly not like the warm, poetic way she usually wrote. But without a body, a crime scene, or any clear evidence, there wasn't much law enforcement could do. The town's concern turned to confusion. Kaelis stayed. In Lunora Bay, continuing his work at the Marine Research Facility. He posted less on social media, but when he did, it was cryptic. Photos of waves crashing violently, captions about solitude and rebirth. It felt strange. Some followers called it poetic. Others thought it was something else entirely. Meanwhile, something was happening at Vexa's school. Her teachers began to notice disturbing changes. Once quiet and obedient, she now stared off during class, her eyes fixed on something no one else could see. She drew pictures of women underwater, hands reaching up through dark waves, and of a house split in two by lightning. She stopped eating lunch and jumped whenever a loud sound echoed in the hallway. When her art teacher gently asked about her drawings, Vexa said nothing, just stared. But the drawings kept coming, each darker than the last. One day, Vexa arrived with visible bruises. Again, this time on her neck and thigh. Her shirt sleeve had been clumsily sewn back together, as if to cover a tear. This time, her teacher didn't hesitate. A report was filed with Child Protective Services, and within 24 hours, authorities were at the Drayen residence again. Kaelis answered the door in his robe, smiling calmly. He blamed the bruises on a fall during a hike. Vexa, when questioned, nodded silently. No words, no resistance, just silence. But this time, something felt different. The investigators asked to search the home thoroughly. Kaelis allowed them in but remained close. Most of the house appeared normal, neat, quiet, and orderly. But when they reached the garage, a pungent smell of cleaning chemicals hit them. The floor looked freshly scrubbed. A large area rug, oddly placed, covered part of the concrete floor. When they moved it, they found small reddish stains, faint but present. Forensics was called in. The blood traces matched Elira's DNA. Suddenly, the story of the peaceful retreat started to collapse. Kaelis was brought in for questioning. He didn't resist. He told them the note was real. He said he had no idea how the blood got there. Maybe Elira had hurt herself before leaving. His tone remained calm, but with the blood evidence and Elira's continued absence, the police couldn't ignore the possibility of foul play. Still, it wasn't enough. There was no body, no murder weapon, no eyewitness. And under the law, suspicion alone was not a conviction. After 2 days of intense questioning, Kaelis was released due to lack of concrete evidence. The very next morning, Vexa didn't show up to school. A welfare check was conducted, but the Drayen house was empty. Every drawer had been cleared out. The closets stood open. Beds were stripped. Kaelis Drayen and Vexa had vanished without a trace. Lunora Bay was left in shock. What began as a worrying disappearance had now turned into a full-scale mystery. The perfect man with the perfect family had walked into the fog, taking with him a terrified child and the answer to a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What had really happened to Elira Cael? The disappearance of Kaelis Drayen and young Vexa sent a wave of panic across the country. Within hours, a nationwide Amber Alert was issued. News channels aired back-to-back coverage of the case. Photos of Elira, Kaelis, and Vexa appeared on every screen. One smiling family, now shattered by secrets and suspicion. Interpol was contacted. Airports, bus terminals, and border crossings were alerted. But Kaelis had planned this well. He had vanished with calculated precision, leaving behind no credit card activity, no cell phone pings, no surveillance footage. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the world. For 2 weeks, there were no leads. Officers searched abandoned. Cabins questioned distant relatives and followed tip after tip, most of which led nowhere. Some believed Kaelis had escaped by sea. After all, he was an expert in marine navigation. Others speculated he had taken Vexa into the deep wilderness to avoid detection. Theories swirled wildly, but none brought them closer to the truth. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A lone hiker named Joran Wicks was trekking through the freezing terrain of Nordheim, a remote, snow-covered region far north of Lunora Bay. He contacted authorities after seeing a man dragging a bundled figure across a frozen path near an old hunter's cabin. The man, tall and unshaven, appeared disoriented and aggressive. The child with him didn't speak or move much. Joran, unsettled by what he saw, reported the incident when he returned to town. Police and search units rushed to the area described. After a long and grueling search through snow-covered trails, they found the cabin. What they discovered inside would haunt them forever. The cabin was in complete disrepair, with broken windows covered by blankets and rotting wood along the walls. In the center of the floor, a hatch led to a crawl space hidden beneath the boards. When officers opened it, a foul smell rose into the air, a mix of mold, urine, and decay. Inside the small, dark space was a crate. And inside that crate, barely conscious, lay Vexa. She was weak, dehydrated, and bruised, her wrists marked with red rope burns. She had been kept in the cramped space for days. She was too scared to speak, too dazed to move. But she was alive. Medics rushed her to the nearest hospital. For a brief moment, the world breathed a sigh of relief. Kaelis, however, was gone. The cabin told its own story. Inside, investigators found drawings taped to the walls, childlike sketches that sent chills through the room. One showed a woman falling into dark water, her eyes wide in terror. Another showed a man with a knife standing over a figure on the floor. Most haunting of all was a picture of a boat on fire, drifting away from a dock, with smoke curling into the sky. Among scattered items in the cabin, police found a piece of torn clothing, black fabric with embroidered waves. It matched the blouse Elira had been wearing the day she disappeared, as seen in her last social media post. The blouse was burned along the edges, as if someone had tried to destroy it but failed. A nearby lake caught the attention of divers. Its icy surface had started to thaw slightly as spring approached. Search teams broke through the ice and began scanning the bottom. After 2 days of effort, they pulled up something horrifying, a rusted anchor tangled with fabric and hair. DNA tests would later confirm it belonged to Elira Cael. With this discovery, the truth became impossible to ignore. Kaelis had not only fled, he had murdered Elira and tried to erase every trace of her existence. He had imprisoned his own daughter to silence her. What he hadn't expected was that Vexa would survive. As news of the rescue broke, the story went global. Images of Vexa being carried from the cabin spread like wildfire. People called her the girl in the box and the child who saw everything. She was no longer just a missing person. She was the only living witness to a murder that had shocked the world. But Kaelis Drayen was still out there, and no one knew where he would strike next. After Vexa was rescued from the cabin, she was placed under protective custody in a secure medical facility. Trauma specialists, doctors, and child psychologists surrounded her with care, but the damage ran deep. She rarely spoke. Her eyes seemed frozen in the memory of something unbearable. Her drawings, however, continued. Page after page revealed silent screams in graphite, figures floating in water, twisted hands reaching up from beneath the floor, a woman's face surrounded by blood-red spirals. It was as if Vexa had stored her memories in art, a language only she could fully understand. The investigation into Kaelis Drayen's whereabouts intensified. He was now the most wanted man in the country. Every highway billboard, news segment, and online feed carried his face. He had become a ghost, but a ghost with a trail. Forensics teams went over the cabin again, this time focusing on the little things Kaelis might have missed. In a hollowed-out book hidden beneath floorboards, they found a map. It had circled locations along coastal routes, abandoned docks, and lesser-known ferry paths. One location, marked with a red X, was a place called Driftmoor Haven, a derelict shipyard on the edge of a dying fishing town. Authorities acted immediately. By the time they arrived, the shipyard was empty, but signs of recent activity were everywhere. Food wrappers, burnt wood from a campfire, and most telling of all, a wall covered in newspaper clippings about the case. Articles about Elira's disappearance, Vexa's rescue, even police sketches of the cabin. Kaelis had been tracking every move. It wasn't just survival, he was obsessed. Among the clippings, investigators found a handwritten list titled Loose Ends. On it were 3 names: Elira, Vexa, and one unknown, Saren Vale. Saren had once worked with Kaelis at the marine facility. Quiet and reserved, she had resigned abruptly a year before Elira's disappearance. Investigators traced her to a small town inland. When they arrived, they found her home locked and her phone off. A neighbor mentioned seeing a man matching Kaelis's description in the area just 2 days before. Inside the house, police discovered clear signs of struggle: a broken lamp, shattered glass, and a blood-stained towel. But Saren was gone. It was now clear. Kaelis hadn't just run. He was eliminating anyone who knew too much. He was methodical, strategic, and most terrifying of all. He was one step ahead. Back in Lenora Bay, the community was paralyzed. The once idyllic town was now synonymous with fear. People who had once admired the Drayens from afar now avoided speaking of them. Their house sat abandoned, windows boarded up, the garden now a tangled mess of weeds and thorns. Some claimed they saw Kaelis at night, standing on the cliff's edge near the house, staring at the sea. Others said it was just the wind playing tricks. The media turned its attention to Vexa once again. Her survival had become a symbol, but the weight of that symbolism was heavy for a child so damaged. She remained quiet, but one day, during a therapy session, she pointed to a globe and traced her finger along the coastline until it stopped at a remote island chain off the southern tip. No one understood what she meant, but investigators took it seriously. Satellite surveillance of the islands revealed an old fishing vessel docked at a hidden cove. The ship, named Sea Rapture, was registered to a shell company linked to one of Kaelis's earlier marine research ventures. A special operations team was dispatched immediately. When they reached the ship, they found it abandoned, again. But this time, they were close. In the ship's lower quarters, they found Saren Vale, bound but alive. She was dehydrated, bruised, but able to speak. What she revealed would send chills through even the most seasoned investigators. Kaelis had taken her because she knew the truth, about Elira, about the night of her death, and about Kaelis's plan to disappear forever. But she also knew one more thing, something no one else had considered. Kaelis was not finished. He had one more name in mind, his own daughter. As the world absorbed the shocking news that Kaelis Drayen had planned to return for his daughter, fear gripped the nation with renewed intensity. The image of Vexa, small, broken, yet somehow still surviving, had become more than just a headline. She was the last thread holding the story together, and now she was once again in danger. Law enforcement tightened her protection. Armed officers were stationed outside her recovery facility. Surveillance was constant. No one was allowed near her without clearance. But Kaelis had already proven one thing. He knew how to get past walls, and he always moved in silence. Meanwhile, Karen Vale remained under protective watch. She was still fragile, but her memory was sharp. In recorded testimony, she described how Kaelis had changed over the years. According to her, Elira had discovered something in Kaelis's work: fraud, data manipulation, possibly illegal environmental experiments disguised under conservation research. Elira had threatened to expose it. That was the beginning of everything. He couldn't afford to let her speak, but his plan had been deeper than murder. He wanted control of the narrative, of his daughter, of the world's memory of Elira. The testimonies, along with physical evidence from the ship and cabin, allowed the authorities to issue international warrants with full urgency. Naval patrols monitored coastlines. Intelligence agencies scanned international communications. But Kaelis had gone dark once again. Investigators feared what might come next, until one final, unexpected clue emerged. An anonymous package arrived at the Lunora Bay Police Department. Inside was a single flash drive. No return address, no fingerprints. Just a note taped to it that read, "She needs to remember." The drive contained a series of videos, time-stamped and labeled with names. Each one featured Kaelis, speaking directly to the camera, explaining pieces of his philosophy, his love for the sea, and, chillingly, his version of events. In one video, he spoke of Vexa. "She is the only one left who still carries my truth. They filled her head with fear and noise, but she will know. She will come back to me." Investigators now believed Kaelis was no longer trying to run. He was waiting. He saw himself as a misunderstood visionary, a father betrayed, and Vexa as the key to reclaiming his legacy. This was no longer just a manhunt. It had become a race to preserve Vexa's safety and break the psychological hold Kaelis still had over her. In the days that followed, Vexa began speaking again. Quietly, carefully, she told therapists what she remembered: how her mother had cried the night she died, how Kaelis had held her underwater until she stopped moving. She remembered the sound of chains, the cold metal of the crate, and the flickering light of the cabin floorboards above her. Most of all, she remembered Kaelis whispering to her again and again, "One day you'll understand. One day you'll come with me willingly." That day never came. In a highly publicized press conference, the government declared Vexa would be relocated under a new identity with permanent protection. No one knew where she would be, not even those who had worked the case from the beginning. She was to disappear into safety, into anonymity, away from the shadow of her father's name. Kaelis Drayen was never found. Over time, sightings were reported from various parts of the world: northern Norway, coastal Spain, even the jungles of South America, but none confirmed. His face became a ghost on wanted posters, aging slowly as years passed. Some believed he had died at sea. Others were convinced he was still watching from the edges, waiting for a moment to resurface. But Vexa moved on. Her memories, though scarred and incomplete, were now being carefully reshaped with care and healing. She grew older, stronger, and quieter than most children her age. She never drew again, and as the world turned its attention to new tragedies, the story of Elira Cael, Kaelis Drayen, and their daughter faded into myth. But those who knew the truth would never forget the heartbreaking murder that shocked the world. and the little girl who lived through it all.